Hey, Larken Rose here. This should be a short video, which is what I always say, and then I usually babble on for half an hour. I wanted to clarify something because there's two, as usual, completely wrong perceptions, two competing wrong perceptions that people have about those in power in government. The scenario that most people are expected to believe, I think fewer and fewer actually believe it these days, but the scenario that we're presented with is you have two different political parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, and that they're sort of arch rivals and they debate things and they have their set of principles and beliefs and they have their set of principles and beliefs and they're debating it in front of the public and then people vote and then our representatives decide the policy they think would best serve the people. Okay, none of that is remotely close to true. And I think at this point, most people realize none of that is remotely close to true. Almost everything is happening behind closed doors. Everything you see in front of you is a show put on by both sets of crooks, and it's not really two sets of crooks as much as it's two faces of the one ruling class putting on a show that's the equivalent of professional wrestling, pretending to be enemies while pushing the same crap forward. And people even fell for it when Trump came along. No, he's different. He's anti-establishment. And then he appointed all the same warmongers and all the same bankers to all the same positions of power. He continued with all the same authoritarian garbage. He, the few things a president can do on his own, like pardoning lots of people who are in prison for victimless crimes, didn't frickin' do. Could have declassified a bunch of stuff single-handedly. Didn't do that either. And then single-handedly instituted the most draconian federal gun control law of my lifetime. With the bump stock ban, which may seem like, oh, not that many people have bump stock bans. Yeah, but he was the first to unilaterally, by just telling the lawyers to change the definition, made hundreds of thousands of Americans into felons overnight for something they already possessed. And if you didn't know, that has not happened in federal gun control for ages. Like the 94 assault weapons ban and all the times they've tried things like that since, it always grandfathers in whatever people already own now. It's about future purchases and future production because they're not fascist enough to try to actually, and not stupid enough, to try to actually disarm people. Donald Trump was the first one in my lifetime to, by himself, without the help of Congress, he just told the lawyers to change the definition of machine gun to include a little piece of plastic that makes a firearm fire repeatedly, bump stock. So he did that by himself, and then, I think we should take guns first and go through due process second. So anyone who imagined that he was pro-freedom or anti-establishment and saying cops are the most abused and oppressed people there are. Oh, those poor fascist thugs. Anyway, some people were fooled by that. It was just bringing in a new clown to the professional wrestling show that they put on. And thankfully, I think a lot of people who fell for Trump have since then realized, wow, he didn't really do anything. There isn't that much a president could do on his own, but the things he could have done on his own, he didn't do any of the ones that mattered. But it's easy for people to fall into the show of sides. Two arch rivals are getting into the wrestling ring to duke it out. And meanwhile, they're having drinks behind the scenes and laughing at how stupid the people who pay their paychecks are. So other than that, I hope most of the country already realizes, the show they put on for the public is not really how things work. It's not how legislation gets made. It's not how agreements get made. It has nothing to do with it. Okay, fine. That's fake. That's bogus. At the other end of the spectrum, I know there are a lot of pro-freedom people who it sort of seems like they haven't really thought about it that much, because they seem to have the view in the extreme other position that every single person in government is on the same page, and they all like each other, and they all get along, and they all have the exact same agendas, and they're all having a secret meeting, all however many hundred or thousand of them you're counting as people in power, and they all sit down and then they go and put on a show. That's not true either. The crooks in Congress are still people, and they're jerks, and they're power happy, and they're elitists, and they're kind of stupid, and they're completely out of touch, and they don't particularly like each other a lot of the time. Now, in professional wrestling, almost always that's a show they put on, but when you talk to some people about the fact that it's one ruling class, doing whatever the hell it wants to us, they often say, well then, why are the liberals and the media so determined to get Trump? Because it's a dumb little game that all of them play inside the template of having a ruling class. Like, if you've seen Game of Thrones, which is a great show and a horrible show. If you've seen it, you probably know what I mean. It's gruesomely horrible. It's not the Disney version of kings and queens and princesses. It's a little more accurate depiction of what people are like and what they do when they're trying to gain power over their fellow human beings. And as I've said before, even the title, Game of Thrones, is kind of genius because that's what it's all about. It's a game to them. Now, none of them are coming out and saying, yeah, this whole royalty thing, this is all bogus. None of us have the right to rule you at all. But inside the insane premise of having a ruling class, they can still hate each other and be vying for this and pushing for that and trying to attack that and ruin his reputation, especially the ones who are just idiot pawns, because most of the people in Congress are just idiot pawns. They have lots of money and they have lots of sway in their own little quarters, but they're still all owned by, huge banks and corporations and the people who give them money. And that's absolutely true of Trump, too, which is obvious to anybody paying attention. It's why he appointed all the same people to all the same positions of power. It's true of absolutely everybody there. Nobody gets anywhere near the White House if they're not good little subjects of the people who actually pull the strings and fund them. Now, I don't bother to get into the list of who that is and the Bilderbergers and the Illuminati and all the different versions of that, because I don't think that actually matters as far as ending the problem, ending the belief in authority. I mean, if people want to get into that and study that, that's fine. I'm not against people looking into that. But I don't think that really gets us any closer to the solution, because the solution is to unplug the whole monster by doing away with the belief in authority. However, when it's good to know your enemy, and when a lot of pro-freedom people tend to think that everything that happens is a show, and those in power have everything under control, they acquire this defeatist attitude even when good things happen. They're like, no, they can't really have been good. Something else must be behind it. And they talk as if it's even possible to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, like crooked, power-happy people, on the exact same page and all, pitching the exact same message. That's not how it works. So when, Elon Musk comes along and says, yeah, let's have lots less censorship on Twitter, people are like, oh, it's a trick. Maybe he's a guy who believes in government, because almost everybody does. He has tons of money, so he likes the influence he has, and he likes the to meet all the important, fancy, schmancy, famous people, because he's human, and he's not a super genius like some people think he is. And he's just a guy, and some of his beliefs are dumb. Some of his technological beliefs are dumb, and he believes in statism. But the idea that he can't possibly really want any level of free speech because he's connected to somebody who's connected. And I see people doing the same thing about Russell Brand. Well, did you know that his ex-girlfriend was the granddaughter of or was married to somebody who's, can't even remember all the links. Somehow there's a connection to some Rothschilds. it's like some people in the freedom movement can't really understand what an individual is, which is super ironic. These are lots of individuals, even the ones who grew up as elitists. Like, RFK Jr. He's a frickin' Kennedy. Do I expect him to be a statist? Yeah, duh. Do I think he might still mean well? Yeah, maybe. Like, can somebody be a statist and be inside the system and still have some good intentions, which are almost always compromised by way of their own attempt to get influence and stuff? Yeah, they're just people. The idea that everybody with any connection to government is somehow like not only pure evil and can't possibly mean anything they say, but is also like they're all conspiring down to the detail of every little thing, so everything that happens was by their plan. It's kind of ridiculous, and the main reason I point that out is a bunch of pro-freedom people are basically spreading the message of resistance is futile, you will be assimilated by the Borg, and there's nothing you can do because absolutely everything that happens is by design and it's all planned by them, and no, it's thinking isn't. And to watch the show, you have to understand that, yeah, the ruling class, on the one hand, they're all on the same side in that they like there being a ruling class. None of them are going to come out and say, none of us have the right to rule you at all. Like, you're not going to hear anybody say that on the House floor. Ron Paul was the closest anybody ever came to saying that. And Ron Paul was in the system, too. He was a complete freak, like, exception to almost everything to be able to be there that long and still be consistent to his principles. Now, his principles, including believing in the Republican Constitution and stuff. Well, he also praises voluntarism, so there's, whatever. He can believe what he wants. But at least he was consistent in his belief till he wasn't there anymore, which is pretty damn impressive. I don't know anybody else that's true of. But he's still just a guy. All the people there are just people. Now, lots of them are slimeballs to one degree or another. And I very much suspect that there are things like by way of Jeffrey Epstein, so that the people in, like, running the show and pulling the strings have dirt on pretty much everybody to make sure that nobody's getting out of line, because we can destroy any one of them that decides to turn on us. But they're perfectly fine having them publicly bicker at each other. Hillary and Trump yelling at each other, even though they've been New York friends for years. And then, lock her up. And then as soon as he's in, no, she's been through enough. Like, how many more examples do you need? But the fact that they don't really do anything to threaten the establishment that empowers all of them doesn't mean they all get along. It doesn't mean they're all best buddies. I mean, you can have, like, a football team and have them work together really well for a common goal and still have grudges and people who don't like each other and stuff. It's not ideal. But if you have two football teams, their goal is to put on a football game. And the individuals might actually hate each other, but the people who own the two teams and are making tons of money off of people coming to the stadium, like, there's nothing evil and devious about that. But they're still serving an overall goal while being at odds with each other. And it seems that most people either think, like, they either believe what's on CNN as if that has anything to do with reality, or they think everybody in government is, like, omniscient and omnipresent and they all know everything and they're all exactly on the same page and everything is a show. Only the show doesn't make any sense. Their propaganda is getting worse and worse. And the stupidity of the game in the eyes of the general public, when you have, like, Trump running against Hillary and then Trump against Biden, like, two senile old power-happy idiots battling on and on, like, that's supposed to represent the great American constitutional republic? Like, that's not them being in control. That's not them perfectly controlling the message and everything that goes on. And a lot of that is true. When it comes to elections and legislation, no, it's not all a foregone conclusion. And no, they're not all exactly on the same page. They all play within the paradigm that says whoever wins those dumb little games that they're playing, and, I'll vote for your bill if you vote for my bill, and we meet behind closed doors to decide all these things ahead of time. Then we put on a show on CNN to pretend any of this has anything to do with principle. Like, yeah, that goes on. That doesn't mean they're all on the same side. It doesn't mean everything's a foregone conclusion. It doesn't mean they control everything. They don't. So that's why I view this as a layer cake of poop, where there's is it the top level or the bottom? The people who actually have the money, who own all of the politicians, right and left and everything in between, like, they're pretty consistent about, you're going to keep doing the warmongering, you're going to keep allowing for the banking extortion and fraud that just is constant all over the place, and you're going to push these things here and there. Then the next layer of poop is poop fighting poop, where the parties are putting on this show of yelling at each other, and yeah, a lot of them really don't like each other, because they're a bunch of parasitic little elitist power-happy jackasses, each vying for who gets to be on their own little throne in their own little congressional seat or Senate seat or whatever they're going for. And yeah, some of that slimeball drama is real. Like, they don't always like each other, but all of them stay within the framework of course this is legitimate, of course we have the right to tax you, of course you have an obligation to obey us. All that crap they are always consistent on. And if somebody comes along like Epstein and there's a threat that, wow, lots and lots of parasites on both sides are about to be exposed as the psychos they actually are, whoops, he killed himself. When literally everybody who knew anything about anything was saying, yep, he's about to kill himself in prison. And then he killed himself in prison, because that sort of crap coming out would actually be a threat to the overall system. If the American people could see what evil, psychotic slimeballs infest both parties, and all the way up to the top, that might creep them out and cause actual disobedience and stuff. So everybody on both sides stomps on that. And like when Ron Paul comes along, the Republican Party stomps on him, the Democratic Party stomps on him, because his ideas were actually a threat to all of them. That brought them together. That brought unity to our government, where they all came together to stomp on Ron Paul because he actually had some ideas and principles that were actually a threat to them. So they're perfectly happy to hate each other and scream at each other and be clawing at each other, crabs in a bucket. But anything that actually threatens the whole game, they are always on the same page, and they always will be until the whole game falls over completely. And I think it just, pro-freedom people need to understand that so they know what we're up against. And one, they don't accidentally give them too little credit. They don't start believing that, oh, if we can get this guy in to push this legislation, no, that's never going to fix it. They're not so dumb that they're going to allow somebody to have actual power and actually do something that's actually a threat to their whole system. Never in a billion years would they allow that. And anybody who's like, if we vote for that, like, you're underestimating their power if you think that. But you're overestimating their power if you think that absolutely everything that happens was by design and they chose it and they're all secretly on the same page on every single thing. No, they're not. They're still human beings. They're slime balls, they're power happy, some of them are just genuinely psychotically evil. Pretty many of them, the higher you get. Lower level bureaucrats can just be normal level of power happy butthead. But the truth lies somewhere in between. No, they're not all powerful, but yeah, they do conspire to do nasty things. And if you jump to either end of that spectrum in your perception of what's going on, you're not going to know your enemy and you're not going to know what to do about it. If you give them too little credit for conspiracy, you're going to vote for their crappy system and accomplish nothing. If you give them too much credit, you're going to think, we're all doomed, nothing's going to do any good because everything's planned. And then you'll do nothing. So either you do something that's worthless or you don't do anything at all. In the middle, you recognize, yes, they conspire to dominate all of us, and everybody in both parties is on board on that. And then they have their little infighting and bickering and playing their stupid games to see who gets to sit on what throne what year. And if you understand your enemy, you realize, okay, their legitimacy is not guaranteed in the eyes of the American people. It's been falling apart for years. And their stupid bickering and the corruption they keep getting caught doing, the stuff that coming out about Hunter Biden and the things they covered up, and then the crap that, you know, Trump is keeping a bunch of, like, top secret documents, which, you know, as far as an immoral thing to do, I couldn't care less. Like, I think pretty much everything top secret should be exposed to the American public. And then the legitimacy of government would completely collapse, which is why Trump didn't declassify a huge amount of stuff that he could have single-handedly declassified and actually threaten the establishment, because he is the establishment. Yes, they're all the establishment, and everyone in the establishment is going to be on the same page on certain things, and then inside that layer of the poop cake, they'll be on the same team. And the next layer of the poop cake, they can bicker about and argue over this policy and that policy, and they're always pushing for more power in one direction or another. But, yeah, if you don't know your enemy, you're not going to know how to play the game against them. So you're either going to vote or hide in a corner. Neither of those are going to do any good. So, yeah, know your enemy and know their weaknesses, and then know how to defeat them. And so the point of this video was to hopefully get some people a better grasp on what the enemy actually is, because they're not this, you know, one group of people who all think exactly the same, even though, yes, of course, they conspire to dominate us all. And then they have their stupid little pointless bickering on the side to see who can play the idiotic game of politics. So don't fall for either one of them. Yeehaw.